My dad says he'll pick me up at dark? Well, he hasn't picked me up, so it must not be dark. This happened about 10 years ago now, and I have a good chuckle about it every time I pass the place in my car. I'm a pretty meek guy, so this is probably the only rebellious thing I did in my entire teenage life. My dad owns a farm, and, being his son, this meant that I had a job when I was a kid whether I liked it or not. Mostly I understood this, but that didn't mean I had to like it. I resented having to spend entire days of summer vacation, dawn to dusk, in a tractor when it came time to harvest alfalfa, which we did 4 times between spring and fall. Basically, imagine a teenager with ADHD forced to sit in one place for 14 hours, and you'll understand how it felt. Honestly, if I wasn't a total introvert, I might have snapped sooner. So anyway, it's the second day of harvest, and it's getting to be late in the afternoon. I've spent about 20 hours total in a haybine by this point over the past few days, and I ask my dad which fields to cut next, and I ask him when I'll be done, hoping, in vain, that I can leave and go play video games or whatever. This is where the titular line comes in, "I'll pick you up at dark." Little does he know that my little teenage heart is clenching with righteous anger for all this wasted, paid, time. So, several hours pass, and I'm understandably getting pretty irritable. It starts getting dark, and guess what? No sign of my dad. At the time, it was becoming a bit of a recurring joke in my family about how my dad was always late, so I knew I was in for the long haul. Then it occurred to me, and the malicious compliance begins. My dad said he'd pick me up at dark, and he wasn't picking me up, so that must mean that it wasn't dark yet. And what don't you need if it's not dark outside? That's right. Headlights. So I continue going back and forth on this wide, empty field, squinting as the light continues to fade after sunset and stubbornly refuse to turn on the headlights. I can easily see the edges of the field of course, but everything else is blending in pretty well. I start purposely and accidentally leaving some shark fins, which are what we call the mistakes that haybine operators leave between rows when they don't get any alfalfa. A few small shark fins per field are fine, even expected, but these are on a whole new level. My dad shows up after about 30 minutes of total darkness. I forget our exact conversation, but I do remember the result. After asking me why I didn't turn on the lights, and me telling him why, he laughed uproariously, and I still remember it fondly to this day. I never did get any punishment. I'm not even sure he understood the extent of the missed alfalfa. It was dark after all and it was hard to see in the dim moonlight, but whatever, it was just a few rows. I, however, like to think he was a little proud of me, because I was the type of teenager who never got into mischief. I asked him about it recently, and unfortunately, he has no memory of the incident. Oh well. I, however, will probably remember this little bit of malicious compliance fondly for the rest of my life. It might have been pretty insignificant, and motivated by laziness, but it was also the first time I really stood up for myself against an authority figure.
Now to the comments. This story was adorably wholesome.
I was expecting his dad to be run over in the dark because the internet has ruined me.
I was expecting something similar. LOL. Ah, duck that alfalfa. I love either now, but I'll shake my fist at the next bunch I see on your behalf. I remember my high school boyfriend getting up at 6 a.m. to inseminate the cows. Uneasy.
Getting up at 6 a.m. to inseminate the cows. Personally,
that's how they do it. Not only that, but it involves rectally fisting them elbow deep. I came to a realization a while back, that I shared with my dad. As a parent, we do what we can to teach our kids, raise them to do the right thing and be good people, discipline them where needed and have some fun with them along the way. One thing we have absolutely no control over is which bits of their childhood will stick in their memory. I feel like I have forgotten whole swathes of time from when I grew up, but some things stick out and I will never ever forget them. Not even significant things really, and I know there are plenty of significant things that I don't remember, just something I thought of one day while wondering if my son would remember something we did. I'll never know. I've now forgotten what it was myself.
I was just thinking about the stuff I remember with my mum, and with my dad, and it seems obvious that they wouldn't remember those times. They were so normal, mostly.
It's gotten worse as we outsource such a large part of our memory to the internet. Win some, lose some. My dad raises hay, my brother raises hay, most of my neighbors growing up had hay in one form or another, and I worked at a dairy for about a year in college, but I've never once heard a swather called a haybine lol. I'm assuming they're the same thing. Maybe you're in a different part of the country and have a different lingo or something lol. Edit to add, I'm in Northern California. When I say swather, I'm talking about the self-propelled machine with a cutting header on the front that also drops the hay into a windrow. Windrow, the thing that picks up the hay and bales it, is a baler here.
Today I learned hay farmers call it raising hay.
Hey son, that's the last straw. This reminds me of the time I managed to weasel out of doing yard work for a while as a teenager. I'm sure I had no good reason to be salty about being asked to mow the lawn, but was anyways. When I was done it just looked so god-danged good, like a work of art, that I had to sign it. My parents watching from the picture window, perplexed as I continued to maneuver carefully across the already trimmed lawn. By the time they had realized my game it was too late. I had lowered the mower blade another inch or so, and you could clearly see my giant initials in the backyard. Told me to cut it, never told me how to cut it. How could I be begrudged some artistic flair?
My mum had flatmates when she was at university, right? One of them was a lovely, sweet, butter-wouldn't melt, Baptist youth pastor, who hated cutting the grass. But one day it was his turn, so with great tragic pious despair he dragged the lawnmower out and filled it up and set it going. Unfortunately, it was summer, and the whose turn is it to cut the grass roster hadn't been updated from winter. In summer you mow once a fortnight. In winter, every 6 weeks. About half an hour later, Mum hears something like an explosion, and something like a duck, and goes to the window to see. A quarter of the lawn mowed, the rest of the lawn with duck. This mowed into it at a height of about a centimeter. The lawnmower sitting in a pile of grass in a fit of pique, stopped, at the end of the S, and the nice Baptist youth pastor storming up the garden path toward the house.
That was one broken man. This was a very cute story. Oh my gosh, what a sweet fun story. I'm glad you have such an awesome memory to look back on. That's awesome. My dad would default to dark equals bedtime for kids. We're Canadian, so it got dark early in the winter. One day, I was sitting in the living room reading. Dad walked by, saw me, looked out at the dark window, and told me to go to bed. I still remember the sweet satisfaction when I looked up and said, "It's 7:30, and I'm 17. No." He looked at the clock, and kinda sheepishly walked away.
OP replied. LOL, good one, must feel good.
This was sweet. That is a sweet story. It's funny how the most memorable and profound moments in a shared life are not the same for both people. I bet he has strong memories about you that you have no memory of. Oh, to live on a farm where I get to stay in nature.
If you call a hayfield nature.
Hey, plants. After asking me why I didn't turn on the lights, and me telling him why, he laughed uproariously, and I still remember it fondly to this day. Oh man, usually I just feel schadenfreude, but this is one of the few times I can say an MC story warmed my heart. Man, I wish my farmer dad was at least cool about the forced, unpaid, labor I had to do. Nope, just angry.
Same.
Yeah, now he's wondering why I don't come home unless necessary and don't call. He was very much I suffered through this when I was a kid, so you have to as well. Not realizing that he's a bitter, angry person that I don't want to become. You have been banned from r/alfalfa care.
For some reason, I'm sad that sub isn't real.
After asking me why I didn't turn on the lights, and me telling him why, he laughed uproariously, and I still remember it fondly to this day. Glad your dad had a sense of humor about it. What an awesome memory for you though. It's funny how some things stick with you that others forget almost immediately. I was talking to my mom recently about this. When I was 14ish we'd gotten into a fight about something shitty I'd done. It was about a year after my dad passed, 2 years for her dad, and I shouted my dad's dead, as justification for my behavior, and she shot back so is mine. It stopped me in my tracks and made me realize that other people have things in their life that affect them too, and it's not an excuse to be shitty. It was a powerful, pivotal moment in my early teenage years and she has absolutely no memory of it. Anyway, good story OP.